Hey there, guys. All right, today we are back with some more of the Great War, and we are on to week 198, the Ostende raid and the Peace of Bucharest. Week 198. It feels so weird. It feels so weird to say that. Because I'm going to be honest, I think I've said this before. Did not think I would actually genuinely go through this whole series. And then one of you commented, I've said this part before, I know that for sure. Then one of you commented that you didn't believe I would actually do it. So then I got stubborn. And here we are. Before we dive into the video, make sure you go and check out the links down in the description box below. I'd love if you join the Discord and follow me over at Twitch. And please do go check out the gaming channel here on YouTube. I upload old streams and dumb clips. I believe when this video goes live, I am still uploading my playthrough of Assassin's Creed 3 Remastered. The story for that game aged way better than I thought it would. Still a little weird pacing here and there, but overall, still pretty good. The gameplay, though, huh, little rough, little rough. Lots of bugs and glitches still in that game, even though it was the remastered version. I don't think Ubisoft did any work on that game. Anyways, with all that said, let's go ahead and dive into week 198.
What do you do to stop the enemy from sending his submarines and destroyers at you? You try to destroy his harbors. And how do you do that? You raid them by night.
What if we just try hugs and kisses? Have we tried that? Cyan.
I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to the Great War. Last week, the Battle of La Lys finished in Belgium, with the Germans unable to reach their objectives. The British also failed to hold Es Salt in Palestine. The Americans were now arriving in France by the hundreds of thousands, but the Supreme War Council could not convince their commander, John Pershing, to put them into the lines. The Bonnet Rouge treason trial opened in France, and the Germans established a military dictatorship in Ukraine. Actually, this week in Ukraine, the former Russian Black Sea Fleet arrived at Odessa and surrendered to local authorities, but there was notable battle action at a port far to the northwest. On the 10th came a British attack on Ostende. The Vindictive was to be filled with concrete and sunk in the harbor mouth in the early morning hours. This was a sequel to the attack 2 weeks ago and was meant to sabotage the harbor as a German marine base. The Vindictive left Dover at midnight, escorted by monitors, destroyers, motor launches, and torpedo boats. A destroyer went ahead to lay the guiding light buoy. There was no bombardment to ensure surprise, and the monitors anchored in their firing positions at sea. When the Vindictive arrived, the motor launches built a smoke screen around her. Airmen above awaited the signal to bomb the town, and the Royal Marine Artillery in Flanders made ready to neutralize the German coastal artillery. 15 minutes before the Vindictive made the harbor mouth, 2 torpedo boats torpedoed the high wooden ends of the pier, destroying a machine gun nest. This was the attack signal. Everyone opened fire. The Vindictive moved into position, but a coastal fog obscured everything. The Vindictive made 3 passes by the harbor entrance before finding it. Under enemy fire, the commander put her stem against the eastern pier and tried to swing the stern around so she lay across the channel at her full length. A screw broke, so this didn't quite happen, and the commander was hit by a shell and killed along with most of the bridge crew.
Ooh.
Still, they blew out the bottom of the ship, and she sank around 200 meters inside the harbor. Or did they? That's what one source says.
What?
Brian Parrott wrote that the ship drifted out of the channel and stuck on a sandbank. The result of this operation still rendered the harbor unfit for large ships like cruisers and made it tough for even destroyers or submarines to use it. Within weeks, though, the Germans had dredged a channel around the sunken ships from this raid and the one 2 weeks ago, and the German subs were back in business. But you know, the original purpose of unrestricted submarine warfare had been to try to knock Britain out of the war, and that had not happened. German Army Quartermaster General Erich Ludendorff still thought the defeat of Britain was not only possible, though, but was the key to the war, and it would happen in Flanders.
A statement without a plan, but it is still a correct statement. He's not wrong. Knocking out Britain is the key to the war. Without the British, the Americans can't land in force in Europe. So yeah, and then without the British, the French aren't going to hold out as long, but also you can't. Right now, at this point in the war, they're not going to be able to knock out the British before knocking out the French. And so you got to knock out the French first, along with the British forces inside of France. The only way they're going to win.
Operation.
And something tells me that the Germans do not win this war, or the next one. Or the next one.
Georgette, though, had brought British and French reserves in droves up to Flanders, so he needed to draw them away again before he could deliver his knockout blow. The movement of the French reserves had left them thinned out in Champagne country, and this was where he would strike. Plans were in the works for further offensives to begin late in May, with the names Blücher, Goertz, and York. The attacks would be against the French in the Chemin des Dames region, held by the French since last spring. The enemy was to be pushed back over the Aisne-Marne Canal, to be pushed back across the Vesle. The Germans would take Rheims, and a secondary attack days later would cross the Oise and the lower Ailette. It was an ambitious series of plans, and the preparations were in full swing. But with the failure of Operations Georgette and Michael, the Germans were starting to run out of time and resources. In fact, Ludendorff's situation was now worse than it had been before Michael in March. He no longer had the army with which he had begun the year, having taken well over 300,000 casualties in the past 6 weeks. That's 1 out of every 10 German soldiers on the whole front. So yeah, they'd literally been decimated. Over
10%! 10% in 6 weeks! Yikes.
Over 50,000 of the absolute best troops had been killed, and there just did not exist replacements of the same quality. A lot of the rest were demoralized, and they had reason to be, for though they didn't know the exact numbers, they knew that American troops were arriving in droves, and as the weeks passed, those troops were ever more ready to join the fight in the field. We've talked before about the colossal challenge it was to get an American army ready for war, but I'll throw out a comparison here just to give you an idea of what had been accomplished in little more than a single year. When America joined the war, its entire army was smaller than the casualties the British took at the Somme, or the French at Verdun, or even the Germans at Verdun, just saying. Where would the Americans fight anyhow once they actively did join in force? The British held the north, and the French the approaches to Paris, so that pretty much left the east, just south of Verdun. Pershing approved of this, since a breakthrough that captured Metz could really hurt the Germans if he could pull it off. He also did not listen to his allies and give top priority to the skills of trench warfare, and thought the war ahead was a war of movement. Whether or not that would be the case, he saw skill with the rifle as the key to victory, and was kind of blind to the effect of machine guns on infantry operations. We've seen this.
Pershing. Yeah, we can see that his strength is in logistics and not necessarily perhaps in, I always mix this up. There is a difference between tactics and strategy, I think. I mean, they can also be used interchangeably, but I think if we really want to get to the nitty and the gritty, there is a difference between being tactical and being strategical. I don't know. I think logistics lies in the tactics and strategy is in the battle. Anyways, can see where Pershing's strengths are and where they are not with this statement here.
Often so far in the war, and this is the kind of thing that can really come back to haunt you. Anyway, hundreds of thousands of men and millions of tons of stuff had to be brought in from the French coast. An office was set up in Paris where Chicago banker Charles Dawes managed and purchased supplies. This was all done day to day, pretty much on a wing and a prayer, since the magnitude of even the little things was staggering. Like to provide telephone setup for the American Expeditionary Force. Yeah, the Americans installed 22,000 miles of phone lines and leased 12,000 more from the French. That's nearly 50,000 kilometers, which is 10,000 kilometers more than the entire circumference of the Earth. So there were a few logistical issues. And those telephone lines were lit up this week by news of the ongoing Bonnet Rouge trial. Lieutenant Marchand, an interpreter with the French army and an expert in German propaganda, testified the 7th against the directors of the Bonnet Rouge newspaper. He showed the similarity between the Bonnet Rouge and the Gazette des Ardennes, which is a paper the Germans published in French in occupied France to dishearten soldiers and the French population. Some of the Gazette articles, which did not appear in the Bonnet Rouge because of censors, also appeared in a German published paper in Zurich. Marchand showed that in 15 different press campaigns, the Bonnet Rouge, the Gazette, and the Zurich paper used the same arguments, cited the same facts, had the same style of composition, and even made the same errors in citation. The final phase of the trial is next week, but things are not looking good for the 7 accused. Another paper was in the news this week, though not a newspaper. On the 7th, the Peace of Bucharest was signed between Romania and the Central Powers. Its conditions: immediate demobilization of the Romanian army, give Bulgaria back all territory Bulgaria lost in the 1913 treaty after the Balkan Wars, give the Central Powers a strip of land so they completely control the mouths of the Danube, an army of occupation to remain in Romania at Romanian expense. This treaty in some ways did to Romania what the Brest-Litovsk Treaty did to Russia. Germany took a majority interest in the Romanian oil fields. Austria-Hungary was given 24%, and this was all under a 99-year lease. And there was some action far to the south, in German East Africa. Last week, British columns from the coast and Lake Nyassa forced the Germans to River Lurio, with British and Portuguese troops approaching from the south. The Germans then retreated to Nanungu. Now on the 5th, though, German General von Lettow-Vorbeck is defeated at Nanungu by General Northey and driven northeastward with heavy losses. And the week ends with a harsh peace for Romania, logistical nightmares in France, a civilian treason trial continues, Germany makes plans for yet more offensives, and the British try to stymie the German fleet. Oh, and on May 9th, a German soldier named Adolf Hitler was awarded a regimental diploma for outstanding bravery.
Never heard of him.
It's crazy when you stop to think of all the stuff you have to do in this war other than the actual fighting. Equipping and supplying millions of men just boggles the mind. 50,000 kilometers of telephone cables. Someone has to put all that up and connect everything and keep track of everyone. And that's just one logistical issue of hundreds. And millions of men are away from home, so who's going to do all this? When you think about questions like this, you realize that modern war is all-encompassing. And if you'd like to know more about Adolf Hitler during World War I, you can check out our special episode about him.
And that was the Ostende raid, the Peace of Bucharest, the Great War, week 198. Just really, we got week 199, and then we are at week 200. Wow. Really coming up quick. This was a good episode. I thought this was really well paced. I don't really have anything to add here at the end of the video. I really enjoyed this one. It just felt good. It was a good video. This was a really good video. I really liked this week. There wasn't much to talk on, but the pacing of the video itself, I felt, and the information covered within this video, I felt were very good. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.